In this video, I'm going to show you how to install the two catalytic converter exhaust pipes, the left and the right bank. I want to start by removing the O2 sensors. Take your O2 sensor socket, slide it over the sensor here, and for me, since this pipe is, well, missing, I have a little bit better access and I can go this way, but typically you'd want to aim it right around here and then stick your tool up above or underneath this drive shaft if you have a four-wheel drive vehicle and break it free. I'm going to go right here. Make sure the socket's completely situated on there. Okay, there we go. That broke free. I'm going to get my socket broken free off of the hex part so I can keep ratcheting it forward. Unfortunately, this one's pretty stuck in there, so I can't loosen it up by hand, but just work it back and forth. At this point, we can actually grab a 22mm wrench, which will be a lot easier and more efficient. I want to disconnect the oxygen sensor. That way the wire doesn't keep twisting around. It'll make things easier. I'm going to grab it with some pliers. Okay, there it is. Now let's finish removing the sensor. There it is. Now do the same thing to the other exhaust pipe next to the other side manifold, and then we'll move to the downstream sensors. All right, do the same thing to the other side. Wow. So this one, I broke it free. I'm actually not going to unplug this one because the wire leads up above this transmission dipstick tube, and it's just going to be inconvenient to try and unplug it. So I'm going to unthread it. I'm going to pay attention to the wire so it doesn't wrap up too tight around the sensor and break. Should be on the last thread right about now. There we go. Take the O2 sensor out, and I'm just going to let it sit over here. Try to not hit it with anything, and now we can remove the leftover pipe. Now I want to remove the two 15mm nuts that hold on what is left of my pipe. Typically you would need a swivel, not for the lower one, but definitely for the top one, just to swivel your socket up and around the pipe. And I highly recommend to use some heat, especially if your hardware looks like this or even in worse condition. So I'm going to heat mine up just a little bit and then blast it off with my 15mm socket. Alright, there's the top mounting nut. Might need to pry this, this flange off. Sometimes that gets kind of stuck on there. There it is. Now let's do the same thing to the other side. Now I want to remove this shield here. It doesn't support anything, it's just a shield to protect the transfer case. Two 10mm bolts on each side. Go ahead and take this off. I'm going to leave this one on temporarily. Go ahead and move to this side. Take these both off all the way. When you're taking this one off, support the shield so it doesn't fall down. Now lower it. You don't have to take the other one off the other side because it's slotted and it comes right out. Set this aside. There are more O2 sensors here, 2 more that is, and we need to remove both of them. Go ahead and slide your O2 sensor socket over, position it however it wants to sit, and then go ahead and break this free. The pipe will move around a little bit. Remove this O2 sensor. I'm using pliers because I'm replacing my oxygen sensor, so if I damage it, that's fine. But obviously if you have to reuse it, which I don't recommend, most likely, as you can see, this one was a huge struggle to even try to break free, so it's also going to break or strip out or at least get damaged. Well, I mean, it's already damaged at this point. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get myself a new one. I'm gonna leave this one in the pipe. We're gonna take the pipe off with the O2 sensor in it. And of course, like I said, we're gonna install a new one in the brand new pipe. It'll just be a lot easier and less risk of damage to the O2 sensor. Now, if this was not the case for you and you can easily take it out and unthread it, of course you can reuse it if you want. And at that point, you would just use your O2 sensor socket, unthread it all the way, unplug it if you wish to do so, follow the wire, pop the connector off, and then you can freely remove it and set it aside safely and reinstall it into your new pipe. Now let's remove the downstream O2 sensor. It's the same procedure for both left and right, so I'm just going to show you this one. Put your O2 sensor socket on here. And let's go ahead and break it free. Well, ours just broke off. Hopefully yours doesn't and you can reuse it. Obviously, I'm gonna have to get a new one. Use an 18mm socket and remove these 2 mounting nuts for the transmission mount. Take this off. It's got this little plate here. Save it. Now I have a pull jack here. I'm going to support the transfer case with the pull jack because we're going to have to remove the cross member that supports the transfer case and the transmission. So I have a piece of rubber in between here because I don't want to press my metal pull jack up against the housing. I don't want to crack it or damage it. Just put a little bit of pressure on, just enough to lift it off the cross member that we just unbolted the mount off of. This is perfectly fine. I see that it's separated a little bit, so I'm going to leave it here for now. Now the exhaust shields are held up with these 13mm headed bolts, which you can't see the head of, but you can see the threads underneath. So reach up and over, and like I said, 13mm socket. Let's just go ahead and unbolt these. To make things go faster, I'm just going to use my air ratchet. Perfect, and do the same to the other side. There we go. 3 18mm nuts hold this cross member onto each side of the frame, so let's remove them. You don't have to worry about holding the other end because it's just a bracket on the other side and it kind of holds itself into place. Once that's loose, you can remove these 2, which are connected on one bracket. I guess you don't have to take them all the way out, just pull them out of the way so that this bracket can come straight down. One more at the back here. Okay, I'm going to leave this stud or bolt poking through so that it holds the cross member in place and it doesn't drop down. I'm actually going to start this nut on just a couple threads for safety purposes so I can do the other side without worrying that this is going to fall on my head. These studs are still in here, and that's all that's holding this cross member from falling down. I'm going to carefully pull the studs back a little bit just to release this cross member. And at this point, if you had your safety nut on this side, push the stud through. That's fine, get it later. And it looks like this side's out, but this side has one stud that hasn't gone through all the way. Just go ahead and push that. Actually, both of these. There we go. Drop it down. At this point, you would want to unbolt your clamp here. Obviously, this is in no state of being unbolted, so I'm just going to cut it off, make a relief cut right here, and then just use a chisel, hammer, whatever you have, and basically free it up, loosen it, so you can get the rest of the pipe out. Well, there you have it. Didn't even need to hammer it. Next, remove your 13mm bolt that clamps down this exhaust hanger, and this is the last thing holding the exhaust pipe on. After this is loose, all we have to do is just slide it out of the muffler pipe. So again, 13mm, break this free and remove it the rest of the way. All right, this should separate at this point. Separate this. There we go. This rubber insert should also separate. Perfect. Now the exhaust pipe can slide right out. At this point, I want to take out these two 13mm bolts that hold this mount onto the transmission. Now, as you saw, our exhaust has been tampered with, so we could technically remove the pipes right now, but if you still had your full-length pipes, you would have trouble maneuvering it. So taking this out will allow this hanger to drop down freely, and then you can slide the pipes forward. So again, 13mm socket, remove these two bolts. Hold it. Spray some penetrant in here, hoping that it will help break the two pieces apart. Don't load it with penetrant because then when you start it, you'll get a lot of smoke. And I'm trying to avoid that, but I do need it to be a little bit lubricated so it can actually slide out. Now, there's a little pin here that kind of locks it into place and prevents it from twisting. And that means the only thing we can do is hammer this outwards straight. So grab a hammer and tap it out. I'm going to try and use my air hammer to separate these two, create some vibration, and maybe they'll break free. These two are pretty tightly fitted in here. There you go. Now let's reinstall the new exhaust. Slide the pipe into the muffler side first. Now grab two mounting nuts. Slide the pipe up, put this collar on, and there's no gasket that goes in there. If you think you need to, you can use some exhaust gasket maker. Try and slide this collar onto the top stud. Put on the mounting nut. Let's snug it up. Now I can get my socket on here. Try to go back and forth between the two. You're probably going to need a swivel socket for the top. Make sure these are nice and tight. Your goal here is to squeeze the pipe onto the manifold, and that's what seals up. If you have exhaust leaks, that's not a good thing. Not only can they get into your passenger compartment, but your oxygen sensors will not read correctly, so that'll be a running issue. Now grab the other side pipe and slide it in. There we go. And then line it up with the manifold. Slide this collar on over here. As you can see, we have one stud missing. For us, that one broke, and I have a bolt that will replace that instead of a stud and a nut. I'm just gonna thread a bolt in there. But to secure it on so it doesn't fall off, I'm gonna put this nut on just to hold it in place. All right, perfect. Now let's get our bolt. Okay, these are both started, so let's snug these up. Let's snug these up. Go back and forth, that way they get tightened equally and it puts even pressure left and right on the flange, otherwise it won't seal up. Nice and tight. Go back to this one. Nice and tight. Okay, now it's time to put on the transmission mount with the exhaust hanger. Slide this up here. I have the two bolts waiting to start in. Thread them on by hand as you hold this up so that it can hold itself up, hopefully. There we go. All right, so that's started. Let's bottom these out, make sure they're nice and snug. Make sure this mount fits into the two hangers well. It does. 13mm socket. Go ahead and tighten these up, make sure they're nice and snug. Perfect. And now let's cap off the hanger. Put the top of the hanger back on. Make sure you have the rubber piece in place. And I'm just going to thread this down by hand as much as I can, and then I'll tighten it up with my wrench. This is also a 13mm. You don't have to go crazy tight on this, just make it nice and snug. All this does is it clamps down the hangers so it can hold it and also absorb vibrations. Now let's go ahead and clamp the exhaust, and I want to put the clamp right here, and we're going to tighten it. Make sure that when you put the clamp on, it's kind of in the middle. You see where it's beveled here and where it ends here. Just make sure it's right in the middle. This pipe happens to have a line. I don't know if that's a mark from the factory telling you where to put the clamp or not, or if it's for a different reason, but regardless, make sure it's in the middle so that it crushes everything evenly. I'm going to have to put a nut on here and use my socket with an extension and hopefully try to squeeze this, or maybe use some pliers. Perfect. nice and tight. Now let's get this cross member back up. Try to line it up with the transmission mount here, the bolts on the side. Try to pry these out a little bit. There we go, that's one. Top one is still stuck. There we go. Okay, that's one side. Perfect. Let's bolt it on. Start on the mounting nuts. Start them on both sides, and then we'll go ahead and tighten them up. All right, just the last one. Now that they're all started, get your 18mm socket or wrench and tighten these up. Tighten up the other side. Tight. That's tight. Okay. Perfect. Now we can lower the jack down and let the transmission and transfer case rest on the cross member that we just bolted up. Get this out of our way. Now put on this plate here, and then the two mounting nuts. Obviously this has some adjustment to it, so just try to center it up. That way it puts even pressure everywhere. You can also see where the nuts were sitting before, but like I said, just make it nice and centered. Get this started, let's tighten it up. Now let's bolt up the exhaust shields again. The bolt is difficult to see because it's right above. Once you line it up, it'll drop down through this J-nut here. That's what these are called. It kind of just falls into place, and then you can go ahead and tighten it up. Make sure this is nice and tight. Do the same to the other side. Ooh, nice and tight. Now let's put in the oxygen sensors. Like I said, I have new ones. Thread them on all the way. If you are reusing your old ones, I suggest putting just a tiny bit of anti-seize on the threads. You don't have to, but usually it helps installation and it prevents them from getting stuck on over time. Grab a 22mm wrench and tighten that up. Perfect. You just want to crush that little gasket there just a little bit. Don't go crazy tight, but you just want to make sure it seals up. Let's plug it in. Make sure it clicks. Let's get the other side in. Grab your wrench, tighten it up. Give it one more turn. All right, that's nice and tight. Let's plug it in. This plug is all the way up next to the transmission. Try to reach for it. There we go, it clicked. Let's put this shield back in on the driver's side. It'll just slide into those two bolts that I left on there. And then on the passenger side, you can just hold it. Start one of the bolts in, make sure it's on there so it doesn't fall down. Then you can let go, start in your other one, and then we can tighten them all up. Make sure it's centered. Let's tighten them up. 10mm socket. Put in the front sensors. I also have new ones over here. Okay, let's grab our O2 sensor tool because my 22mm wrench doesn't fit up there. Pretty tight. Let's plug it in. Put the passenger side O2 sensor in. This upstream one is going to be a pretty tight reach, so I'm going to go in through the wheel well and reach up and over. Feel for the threads here. Found them. Slide the O2 sensor in. Make sure the wire doesn't wrap itself around anything. Just try to start it onto the threads. Once it starts, it'll be a lot easier to tighten it up. It's just starting it that's difficult because it wants to wobble around. All right. Now with our O2 sensor socket on here, let's go ahead and tighten this up. Let's give it the last couple turns here. Make sure that it is actually nice and tight. Okay, I'd say that's as tight as it's gonna get. Let's plug the connector in. So you're looking through the fender well here, but you can reach it from either the fender well or down below underneath. Okay, oops, it's not plugged in all the way. Let's try to line up the connector and see if I can use this little pry bar to basically just push the connector up into place. Try to be very gentle if you have to do this. You don't want to break any wires or connectors or anything. There we go, that just clicked. That's plugged in. Now go ahead and start up the engine, make sure you have no exhaust leaks, and take it for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.